Let's take you back now to one of our top stories. As Eskom continues its power cuts, small businesses and restaurants say they continue to adapt to constant changes of load shedding. This as they are just recovering from the effects of COVID-19 and the lockdown regulations. Newzroom Afrika's reporter Ahmed Kajee joins us now to talk about the impact this is having on business. Ahmed, very good afternoon to you. We've seen the ripple effect with power cuts. We saw how it impacts people's interactions online and also the world of business. I mean, you've been out to several restaurants throughout the course of today. What were some of the findings as you went from door to door, establishing how big an impact load shedding is having?
I think with this being, what going on north of 10 years worth of load shedding, many small businesses, many restaurants have worked on contingency plans already. But the immediate impact, what we have seen over the last 2 to 3 weeks or so, is many people are now actually going out to eat when load shedding happens to kick in. Personally, I am one of them.
Yeah.
But that's what they have said. As soon as it's payday and the weekend after payday, they say it's exceptionally busy. So what the restaurants in Melville said that last week was relatively busy, last weekend just after payday. This weekend there was a slight downturn, and that was just because they assume everyone may have went down to KZN for the Durban July. I mean, that's a massive part of South African culture out in the middle of the year. So that's the main reason that maybe there was a downturn this weekend. But a big part of what they're saying for this particular part of load shedding, which we have seen over the last 2 weeks, is many people just do not want to sit at home anymore in the cold, perhaps not having any internet access. So they are actually heading out to perhaps have a drink, to perhaps have a meal. And in some situations, and some coffee shops which then offer Wi-Fi, they actually can get some work done. So there has been an increase on that, on the levels of patronage.
Yeah.
But in terms of the output that they can actually offer in terms of meals, much of the kitchen equipment actually requires a lot of electricity. So those which honestly cannot operate on a generator or something along those lines, that's where they are seeing the output being reduced. And in some way or form, their bottom line is then being affected.
And how's the staff coping? I mean, as you interacted with some staff members, how they're feeling, and perhaps some sort of changes and adjustments that they've had to make in order to ensure that they can deliver come crunch time?
Almost definitely. So a big part of the staff changes which they had seen is actually a change in their trading hours. We were out at Saleh's Bakery in Fordsburg, and a big part of their production is actually involved in rolls, and that's the baking of those takes place between 6 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. With load shedding being implemented in those particular hours at the bakery, the manager Mohammed Saleh said that they actually now have to bring in their staff between 3 and 6 to start their production between 4:30 and then try getting out as much as they possibly can until load shedding either kicks in at 6 a.m. or at 6:30. So that entire process has now kicked everyone back. And you think in the winter, if someone has to be traveling from Soweto, from the likes of the Johannesburg CBD, it is dark, it is cold.
Yeah.
So there is the health issue which many workers would be concerned about, as well as the safety challenges as well. And that's a completely different aspect which one wouldn't have considered when the start of load shedding had kicked in about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, you made mention of some options and perhaps some of the meals not being able to be served or even made because some may require electricity. So what are some of the other contingency plans that are in place which may impact the bottom line because of the extra additional expenses?
I mean, we spoke at just after 4 o'clock, and just initially after we started chatting, the power went out in the Ravioli restaurant where we were in Maboneng precinct, and the manager at the time said that as much as they are trying to involve generators, a big part of their main meals involves the ovens which rely on electricity. So their single-phase generators do not simply power their pizza ovens, and that's one of their most popular meals as well. So on that front, these are some of the major challenges they are facing without electricity, and even if they do have backup generators. And speaking of those generators, they say that they are trying to implement it as and when they can. Like I said, load shedding has been a part of life over the last 10 years or so. So in many ways, people have already started to find a way to mitigate the challenges which they do face. But over the last 2 to 3 months, I think with the Ukraine conflict breaking out in February, the oil prices have increased significantly. So those who already do have generators, unfortunately, are paying even more now for the diesel to actually fuel their particular restaurants. So apart from getting maybe a reduced amount of output from their restaurants, a reduced amount of patronage coming through, what we have seen over the last 2 years, for those who are actually trying to operate now, whatever limits they do have on it, they are now being even multiplied, given the fact that the fuel price has increased more than 2 to 3 rand, and we are obviously expecting another fuel hike coming up on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So one would only assume with Eskom announcing that, load shedding will be continuing for the coming weeks or potentially months as they try to perhaps increase the generation capacity and stabilize the grid. One would hope that in some way or form the restaurants can continue to function in an economically viable way while trying to get as much diesel in to actually get their generators working, while trying to get as much food output as possible.
So what did you notice as you walked around the various shops and saw the other shops that weren't restaurants and, the impact on load shedding there? I don't imagine people going shopping for dresses in the dark.
No, generally not, and that's a major challenge we have. I think in the Fordsburg region you always will find, these outlets which are focusing mostly on, clothing, like you say, buying food items as well. And these are just some of the items, DVDs as well, let's not forget. And many people can't really go shopping in the dark. And if these stores do not have generators or simply cannot afford them at this particular moment in time, those numbers have reduced. Given the fact that traffic lights are also out at this particular time, that's also a major challenge for many businesses who would like to receive some sort of customer base as well. And I mean, at the end of the day, many people are still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, so money is relatively tight. So in terms of just trying to recover and getting more customers in, that's something that, many businesses would want, but with the impact of load shedding, many people aren't coming out, many people aren't spending as much. And it's just a really unfortunate situation across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you. Ahmed Kajee bringing us the latest on the impact of the rolling blackouts and load shedding out in the streets as some are not able to operate and, of course, resorting to other measures to keep their customers coming in.